Today we're going to talk about the real estate market on the Sunshine Coast in the last year and make some predictions for 2022. When talking about living on the Sunshine Coast, there's no avoiding real estate. And in the past, we've talked about real estate in a general sense. But in this video, we're going to review the 2021 housing market with Realtor Tony Browton. And I'm going to put him on the spot and get him to make some predictions for 2022.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks very much for having me.
Anybody that's been paying attention to the Sunshine Coast in the last year, well, really the last 2 years, I guess, has seen pretty steady price appreciation, some pretty big jumps. Between November 2020 and November 2021, housing prices have seen a 26% increase on the Sunshine Coast. And if we go back 3 years, prices have increased nearly 40%. What do you think is driving these huge jumps in value?
I think just a different buyer group. So traditionally, the main buyer group has been retirees, and the ferries have been a barrier to market for working people. But since COVID hit, it's kind of changed, and with the Sunshine Coast having a good, reliable internet service and reliable power, these buyers that would never consider the coast because of the ferries are now more than happy to move to this area. And I think it's trending all over Canada and North America and the UK that people are moving to rural areas because they're no longer office bound, so to speak. They don't have to go into the office as much anymore. So we become a viable option. And because the ferries were such a barrier to market, we were undervalued in comparison. Like I know we'd always talk and we'd compare Gibsons to the Chilliwack market and the prices there. So now we're kind of in parity with those prices, and our proximity to the city is much closer. So I think that's only going to continue, assuming that there's still COVID concerns and variants of concern and that kind of thing. So I can't see it changing in the short term.
Well, and even with young people, like younger families now moving to the coast and doing this remote work, there's still huge demand for the retirees that were the market to begin with, right?
That's right, yeah. So they're competing. Those two groups are competing with each other. It's just the younger demographic seems to have deeper pockets, and they're driving up the prices and winning most of the bidding wars. It's anecdotal by area. For example, the appreciations amounts and that kind of thing that you were talking about on the coast in general would be much more significant in, say, Gibsons than Pender Harbour, and it kind of diminishes, kind of up the coast. But Half Moon Bay is an area where there's still a lot of demand from retirees to move to. They're the bigger properties. They don't have to go to the city ever, whereas the younger buyers are typically sticking, West Seashore would be the furthest that they'd go, and because some of them will have to go into town periodically.
Something we hear about a lot of times are like foreign buyers, that there's like all this, quote unquote foreign money pouring into the coast.
I'm starting to see a bit of it now. Up until, the last 2 months, I didn't see a lot of foreign buyers. I mean, a few like British expats, that kind of stuff, but most people think that it's kind of like there's a lot of mainland Chinese money coming to the coast, and I haven't seen that much at all. What I've found is that mostly we're influenced by foreign buyers in the sense of they're buying in areas like Richmond or the North Shore, and that's pushing people over to the coast because they can't afford those neighbourhoods anymore, and comparatively we're very, priced reasonably. But now I'm starting to see people buy stuff on spec. So I'm starting to get phone calls from realtors that they're seeing what's happening here, and they're just buying anything they can because they know it's going to be a good holding property. And then it's kind of the perfect storm right now with there being such low rental inventory that you can get a very good return on investment from an appreciation perspective, but also on a monthly servicing of the mortgage payments, because you can demand a premium to rent them out. And long-term rental is in huge demand, which is why some of the local municipalities are doing what they can to reduce Airbnbs. But those things combined are meaning that people now are buying, just because they want to park their money somewhere.
Whether these buyers are, young buyers or older buyers, or like you're saying, a small amount of maybe foreign money now, that the actual cash to buy has to come from someplace. So where do you think that money comes from?
If they're foreign buyers, typically it comes from, depending on where they're coming from. But in my experience, foreign buyers will be pooling money. So if they're coming from say India or mainland China, that type of stuff. In my experience, it's family money that they've pulled together to come up with a down payment for the person moving to buy. For people relocating from like North Van, West Van, that kind of thing, they're either selling a house that they bought there, and using the equity that they've built to buy a house, or a lot of times it's help from mum and dad. That's a lot of what you see with first-time home buyers, or what I call this new breed of buyers, which are typically under 40 with a couple of kids. If they're buying for the first time or for the second time, there is quite often family helping out, and you do see a lot of family now coming back to live with their kids. So it might be mum and dad and two kids, and then one of the parents are going to live there, one of the spouse's parents. So that's kind of what I'm seeing.
I'm going to put you on the spot now, Tony. And if you look into your magic realtor crystal ball, what do you see for the Sunshine Coast real estate market in 2022?
I think inventory concerns, and when I say inventory concerns, it's just lack of inventory. So as someone that has a decent chunk of the market and does a lot of listing, that is a big concern for my business is not having any inventory to sell. So I think that will continue just because people are no longer flipping homes or selling and then thinking they're going to find somewhere. So it's if someone's selling, they've pre-negotiated a deal to buy somewhere, or they're moving off coast because it's so tight out there that people that have sold end up being desperate if they haven't got somewhere to go. I think that will continue. Will there be a correction in pricing and that kind of stuff? Not with the demand remaining low. I think if we end up getting somehow more inventory comes on the market, which I don't see that happening. It's tough to have a crystal ball because last time we did this was pre-COVID and I was completely wrong. So I don't know. But if everything continues like I'd say for at least the first quarter, half of the year in 2022, I'd say it's going to remain exactly the same. I think spring will be a really busy time. I think the collective consciousness is very aware of the coast now, and I think that people are analysing it and looking at it like investors did 10 years ago in Squamish. The highway there and the upgrades due to the Olympics and that kind of stuff really opened up that market, and people's lack of need to commute and the ferry system no longer being a barrier to market is going to drive a lot of buyers out this way. And I still think we've got quite a ways to go before we're at parity with similar locations. I think that with the variants of concern and what's happening with this Omicron right now, and if people continue to be reluctant to get vaccines and that kind of stuff, especially in other countries where they may not have access to vaccines at all, you're going to continue to see variants, and that's going to continue to drive people to put barriers up between them and large populations of people, as long as they still have all the the niceties and amenities and that kind of stuff that they need. So I think that will just continue to drive people to the coast, and that again the barrier that is the ferry will overnight essentially has become a benefit. So I think that'll continue. So I think people that got into the market before all of this are pretty happy, but it's scary because if you were going to sell, where can you possibly go? And then with inflation happening, as fast as it is, I think that's also driving, regardless of interest rates and that kind of stuff, I think that it's driving a lot of people to park their money in real estate. So I think, that's a little bit of the frenzy as well, because I think savvy investors are looking at whatever it is, a 6% inflation rate now, and thinking what's the best thing that they can do so that as their money devalues, they don't, lose any buying power or anything like that. So
you're thinking then that if there continues to be inflation, even if there's an interest rate increase, that interest rates are kind of a neutral factor then in whether there's continues to be demand for housing?
I'm not a particularly smart fella or an economist, but from what I can see, the government has the ability to control interest rates, but they've got no handle on inflation at the time, and they can't, right? They've been printing money for 2 years now and giving it away to stimulate the economy, and that's resulted in inflation. So they don't have a handle on that. They don't know where that's going to go. So is that going to result in a devaluation of money and higher interest rates? Yes, but in that situation, where does a savvy investor park his money? And 9 times out of 10, an advisor is going to say put a percentage anyway in real estate. That's what I think is part of what's driving this as well. You've got the people looking to relocate out of the city and set themselves up for a nice lifestyle with their families. You've got the traditional buyers who are the retirees that want to go somewhere and have a bit more of a peaceful life. And now you've got investors looking to park their money in real estate. And when they're looking around the province, they look at the Sunshine Coast. There's Pemberton and a few other areas as well, but they're saying no foreign buyers tax, no empty home tax, a disproportionate level of property appreciation that's anticipated to continue for a long time, a lack of rental accommodation and housing because local governments have been so reluctant to allow any development here, or even let's say planned development. Everything, in my experience on the coast, has been reactionary, with the exception of some local builders that seem to do it right. There's been no development, and then they have to do something because their tax base isn't generating enough revenue and that kind of stuff for them, so they've got to do something. But it's not necessarily correct in what they've proposed, and it doesn't necessarily fill the void in the housing demand.
Especially in the short term. Even if somebody came and said they were ready to build a big subdivision that was going to add hundreds of houses to the coast, like you're years away from people moving into those homes, best case scenario.
And there's no infrastructure in place for that kind of a population increase because, there's differing opinions on why that hasn't happened, but there's definitely, we live in a rainforest and yet we have water shortages. That just seems to me to be mismanagement at multiple levels of government.
Something that people not local to the coast might not know is that every summer we're inundated with film crews to shoot Christmas movies for Hallmark. And a couple of years ago, actually, Tony was in one of those
all
movies.
Summer long. Yes.
So I feel like
highlight of my career.
I feel like you've got insight into the film industry now. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So who do you think will be the big celebrity get for the Hallmark Christmas movie this year in Gibsons?
I heard that, this is unconfirmed, but I did hear that when Ryan Reynolds was on Corner Gas Animated with Brent Butt, I did hear they were talking about doing like a bit of a Molly's Reach reboot. Those two guys, because when the interview I saw with Brent Butt, he was saying that his Corner Gas had become kind of the most beloved sitcom kind of thing in Canadian history, and then people were saying that Molly's Reach was. So I heard that they're going to do a little bit of a collaboration, like a little half an hour special.
Beachcombers 2.0?
Beachcombers 2.0 with Deadpool, and yeah, that's what I heard. So that's my prediction.
There you go.
Ryan Reynolds and Brent Butt will be here.
Okay, fill in the blank. In 2022, BC Ferries will...
continue to be the most hated ferry service in the world. I don't know. I don't know. I don't think I can't see it getting any worse. But they never seem to let you down.
You spend a lot of time out and about talking to clients and showing people houses and neighborhoods and all the rest. What's your go-to spot for lunch on the coast?
Go-to spot. I like Nagomi Sushi down in Lower Gibsons. I think that's a gem down there, and that's where I personally go most of the time. So that would be my go-to. I think the Blackfish obviously is a good lunch spot. They've got a nice big menu, and it's not too pretentious or any of that kind of stuff. So they'd be the two that I would frequent most frequently in Gibsons.
Do you have a local business that you think kind of is a well-kept secret on the coast that is underappreciated?
A local business. Well, I because I'm in the business that I'm in, I do get quite a bit of dry cleaning done. So I appreciate there is only one dry cleaner on the coast, and I do like the service and that kind of stuff I get from that one. So that's Bergman's Dry Cleaners, and I think the proprietor there's Chris Barlett, I think it is Barlow maybe. Anyway, he's a good guy, provides a good service. So I think that's a bit of a gem.
If somebody watching wants to sell their home the first part of 2022, what is your advice to them?
First bit of advice, and I say this to everyone, where are you going to go? Don't just list your house thinking, oh, the prices are good and I'm going to be able to sell it, because if you do that and you don't have a plan and you end up taking a few months to find somewhere, even if you've got a long close, you could conceivably price yourself out of the market or end up, losing a little bit, leaving some cash on the table. So I'd say that's the most important thing. Have a clear plan, understand why you're selling, and then try to, figure out a way that what everyone wants to do, sell at a good time and then buy appropriately. I've had some clients this year which have sold and then not taken my advice on places to write offers, and they were happy getting top dollar for their price, but then they wanted to lowball everyone, and have ended up in a situation where there's a ticking clock and they haven't managed to pull the trigger. So that's what my main advice would just be to figure out where you're going to go and come up with a realistic plan to do the transition.
Same question. If somebody was thinking to buy in the first part of 2022, what would your advice to buyers on the Sunshine Coast be?
Yeah, it depends on what they want. The main thing is to be ready to go. So you need to be working with a local agent. The Sunshine Coast is a pretty big area, so you even get local agents here that specialize in specific areas. Like I'll work all the way up, to Half Moon Bay, but the majority of my business, 90% of my business is in Gibsons. So I'm super doled into that, that market. I would never presume that if I was to go to Commercial Drive because a friend of mine wanted to buy a condo there, really ethically, I wouldn't be able to go and represent them in that area because I don't know that area. And I could do it. I would go and do a bunch of research, but that would really be an indication that I'm not that successful in the area that I'm in, that I'm willing to take all this time to go. So with the exception of maybe a wife or a spouse, that type of stuff, why would you go and do that? And most realtors have good, referral networks. So they'll have a good agent in different areas, or their brokerage will, and they're much better being referred out that way. So the first thing I do is make sure I'm dealing with a local agent that does a decent amount of transactions and knows what they're doing. The second thing is if you haven't already got pre-approved and talked to a mortgage broker, definitely talk to a mortgage broker, get yourself pre-approved for that, and then just be ready. If you're looking from out of market, you need to be ready to jump on a ferry and get over here, or jump on Harbour Air and come over here now that agents can pick you up, and get your agent to pick you up and go see the place, and if you like it, write an offer and have your mortgage broker on standby. A lot of times this year what's happened is mortgage brokers that work in the city don't understand that we only have coastwide appraisals here pretty much that does the appraisals, and so they'll be booking 3 weeks out. I'll get an accepted offer on my place from a Vancouver agent that is working with buyers that are relocating. They put all the paperwork in, not realizing, so I give them a heads up and say, you got to get the appraisal booked if you need it. And quite often in a market where property is appreciating much, much faster than the average, the property reports or the BC assessment on the property is going to be much lower than what its actually market value is. And so when banks see that, they go, whoa, we got to get an appraisal. And if it doesn't appraise right, then the buyer has to come up with a larger down payment, which if you've already put down your deposit and removed subjects without that appraisal, you can not be able to qualify for the mortgage and lose the deposit. So the appraisal is a key part of that process. So that's one thing, is to make sure that the mortgage broker you're dealing with is aware of the nuances of this particular market, and make sure that they have a direct line to the underwriter, whoever they need to deal with at the mortgage company, to get that appraisal done. So they're the two main things I'd say. And then thirdly, just spend some time, figure out where you want to live. If you can find a rental, maybe, try renting here. It's not for everybody. And I do see that's one thing that may come up next year, is there may be a whole bunch of people that have got this romantic idea that they're going to move to the Sunshine Coast and raise the kids and all that kind of stuff, and then realize at 9 o'clock at night. And I think actually you guys have a podcast that talk about 5 things you might hate about living in a small town. That's probably, I don't know, a lot of them might have come from people I've sold houses to. I'm not sure. But that's the other thing, is to really suss it out and figure out, is this where you want to be?
Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, please like the video and maybe consider subscribing to the channel, as it really helps us out. And if you're into this kind of content, there's some more videos right here for you to watch now.